Hi, Will Brooks from Spectrami in the UK. I'm here with Steven Hope, co-founder of Authlogics. Welcome.
Thanks.
Today we want to talk to you about password management and password challenges that exist in the NHS specifically. The NHS is the biggest employer in the UK, employing about 1.5 million people, and I think it's the fifth biggest employer in the world. So you can imagine a lot of usernames, a lot of passwords. Mm-hmm. And you've been very successful as an organisation helping the NHS with some of their password challenges in a few individual trusts, haven't you?
Yes, that's correct. And we've helped a few trusts with their password challenges. And the challenges vary greatly from the risk of breached passwords being out there on the web all the way down to the cost of managing passwords, help desk resets, user training of how to create a password, all the usual behaviours and password sharing as well between different applications and systems within the NHS that causes all sorts of accountability problems.
Okay, so we've just drawn out a really simple bit of a network here, and we've got the domain controller and some users. Now, the user scenario in the NHS it's a 24-hour operation, and there's people using this. So this machine here will be used by multiple people every single day. So it'll be logged on, logged off, logged on, logged off. Mm-hmm. So it's very easy for people to forget their passwords, or for different machines not to be able to access the right information. So password and access is really important to these users. And I guess we see it in the NHS as the same as in everything else, people using perhaps unsecure passwords.
Yeah, but very much so. Unfortunately, the legacy password policies that the Active Directory make use of, they kind of put people down a path of bad password behavior. We see a lot of things, sticky notes under keyboards. A lot of people don't even log off and log on. They just share a log on because it's just easier than trying to remember what their password was. So this creates a lot of issues within the NHS, and it's time to change it. But what we've seen from stats that we've got in our database, because we've got a database of 1.8 billion breached credentials from around the world from various breaches. The NHS alone, we've got about 53,000 credentials in that database just from the NHS, and about half of those are from NHS mail, and the other half are from actual individual NHS networks themselves. It's about 130 or so NHS domains that we've got in the database, which are regional and have got varying numbers of breached credentials in that database.
And if somebody gets hold of those credentials and they're out there on the web, they're available, mm-hmm. You can potentially it makes it much easier to brute force your way into key systems. Exactly.
I mean, the brute force becomes pretty negligible because you've got the username and the password. They just log in. Not all NHS trusts are using multi-factor authentication and other protection mechanisms on their network, or especially within their network. So a lot of the time people can literally just walk into a hospital, walk up to a PC and log on with one of these credentials.
Okay, so let's jump forward. This is an NHS trust that wants this problem solving. What does Authlogics do?
Well, our first step would be a very, very quick process that we would literally be in there for less than a couple of hours even, where we would look at the existing Active Directory database and analyze all of the passwords in there and check them against our cloud, and be able to tell the NHS exactly which users are using a breached password.
Right, okay. And that's great. So then they get a scale of the problem. You understand that maybe there's 5,000 users in this particular trust, and out of that there's 100 or 200 users that are using breached passwords that are on this database and publicly available.
Actually, as the statistics are quite interesting, because generally you find about 30 to 40% of the user accounts are currently using a breached password.
And that will be something like capital P A 55 W0RD.
Very much so, or it could just be a very simple name of a place or a road name or something, but it's been used so many times by so many people that it's on breach lists.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be a simple or a complicated password. Anything could have been breached by one thing or another.
So you've identified the problem, and the organisation says, yes, we want to do something different. We want to put a better password policy in place. We want to stop people using breached passwords. What's the next step?
Yeah. Well, part of that initial process, the audit, is you get a nice audit report per user, analyse the risks of everything. But that's a snapshot in time.
Yeah.
Now, if you go and take all those users and say all the ones with a bad password and tell them all they've got to change their password, how do you know what they're going to change them to? They might change them to another breach password.
Yeah.
So what we do is the proper solution down the road is we install what we call Password Policy Agent onto the Active Directory. It's a very small agent that installs on the domain controllers only.
Yeah.
No desktop software is required. This makes it a very, very quick deployment. And the agent is a very lightweight bit of software that just runs the service on the domain controller, and it intercepts all the password changes in Active Directory.
So this is a breach password user here. They're logging on. They're going to change it.
They change their password. The request hits the Active Directory, which then our filter comes in, and then we will look at that password, compare it against our database to see is the password the user is wanting to use already breached or not.
Yeah.
And if it's already been breached, then we stop the user from having that password, and they get told they're going to try another password. So what that does, it keeps the Active Directory clean from known breached passwords going forwards.
Okay.
And the benefits of this is also you can simplify the password policy. So you can turn off the uppercase, lowercase complexity nonsense. You don't have to change the password every 30, 60, 90 days anymore. The user can keep that password for a year or 2 years if need be, and only need to change it when a compelling event happens, like it's been found to have been breached in the wild.
Yeah.
So this straight away cuts down on all the resets and help desk calls that you always get when people forget their passwords or they've changed
Come
it
back
and now
from
they don't
holiday.
know. Exactly, all of those things. It becomes a real pain. So, changing the policy has many, many more benefits bar just the security side, including user training, educate the user to come up with a passphrase. They're a lot easier, but often passphrases, although more secure, don't comply with old password policies of uppercase, lowercase nonsense.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of re-education, massive help on the help desk side as well.
Okay, so there's tons of benefits that we're seeing straight away. And then what about, so we've checked when we've set the password, whether it's on the breach database. What about if that password becomes breached elsewhere in the world at some other point? I'm still using that password. Does it help me in that scenario?
Yes, it does. The agent we run in Active Directory also keeps monitoring existing passwords going forwards against our cloud. So if the user put a password in that's acceptable today, and next week that password gets breached, the user will automatically be told they need to change their password again.
Okay.
And when they get forced to change it, obviously they have to pick one that's not been breached.
Okay.
Yeah.
And does it matter what desktop I've got? Because we haven't got Windows 10 in many NHS trusts at the moment. What about Windows 7?
The nice part about this is you don't install any software on the desktop, so it doesn't matter what the desktop operating system is whatsoever. It's very, very simple.
Okay. So it's a great solution. If you're in the NHS and you're looking to secure your passwords, improve the policy, then please get in touch with us here at Spectrami.